So for my literature review, I kind of broke it up into my three different sections of how I developed my deliverables. Um, so my first literature review was bilingual education, and I found some really good resources that I have also used in a lot of my coursework. Um, and it just talks about how bilingual education programs are known to be very effective, and how there are studies that show that bilinguals outperform monolinguals on a number of tests. So, those basic quotes that I use for my literature review, I pulled out just to give you an idea of where I got my information from and how effective it seemed to be. The second slide for literature review is mentoring programs. So these are programs I chose to do student to student mentoring programs. I felt that English language learners really benefit from having a mentor with them. Um, they are there's studies that proven that average relationship length through 2010 was 1.5 years, with 95% of relationships lasting at least 1 year. So I think just having somebody that has already been through that grade, and that they can relate to really will help students feel confident. So I wanted to look for literatures that kind of highlighted that, but also ones that might not work. So they can act as positive role models, demonstrate appropriate social behavior, and listen to and understand the common frustrations and concerns of other students. So not only did I implement mentoring programs on a social basis, I also wanted to implement it on a reading basis. So do they have reading suggestions that maybe teachers might not know about, and the students say, hey, I used to do this when I was in your grade, and this really helped me. It's kind of different hearing it from a student's point of view. So if you look at Collar and Kuo, they had stated that high quality mentoring relationships have promoted child health through improvements in academic performance, positive feelings of self worth, perceived social acceptance, and relationships with others. So I think that highlighted basically everything that I wanted about a mentor. Um, and it just really reflects the change in how a student feels about themselves and how they feel about coming to school and doing academic work that might not be on their grade level and might not be on their academic level. So giving them that support has really increased numbers in other school systems. The last literature review section is ELL teaching strategies and language standards. So I pulled some strategies that I found that there's gaps in vocabulary knowledge. So what I did was, for my first deliverable, which you're going to see in the next slide for research design and methods, is vocabulary. It's a vocabulary scavenger hunt where students need to find the word and kind of use context clues to find the meaning. And then they would rotate and see what other students in the classroom had. So I wanted to reflect some of the quotes that you see here on the literature review. So it says, let's make vocabulary instruction meaningful for our students so that words are not merely vain sounds, but vibrant expressions that reach to the core of every student. So what I think that means is giving them the opportunity to make vocabulary meaningful, not just giving them a word, having them spell it, not realizing what it means. They need to really dive deep and make the vocabulary meaningful so that they understand it when they're reading it. So now we begin the evaluation and assessment section. I have a self-assessment and I also have a panel of experts assessments where I had 4 panel of experts receive a questionnaire and they answered the questions based off of my project and my deliverables. So if you notice on the first 2 slides is my self-assessment. So this is the process that I went through. So did I adhere to my schedule? Was my evidence of learning and professional growth through a TESOL lens? Does it show personal and professional value in the project? So based off of these 3, I believe that I showed and demonstrated superior use of all of these. I think that my project really shows a good TESOL lens and how students and teachers need to change their teaching to target those students to really access their needs. And then on the second slide is where I kind of dive deeper into my process of this is the second part of my self-assessment. The project shows competence in the Masters of Education. Okay, now we get into the discussion and reflection section of my TESOL concentration outcomes. So, number 1, students will analyze and evaluate how culture, race, and ethnicity affects student learning and achievement. So, if you go back to basically my whole entire project, this kind of wraps it all up. So, what students, what their ethnicity, their culture, what that has to do with student learning. English language learners all are targeting that first concentration because you need to be able to look at their different languages and different cultures and how the students learn and achieve, and what are the best ways that we can get them to learn and achieve in a general education classroom. Number 2, students will evaluate, design, and adapt best practices. So this is the instructional strategies and resources that I used in my first deliverable with the comprehension strategies. So really getting into the visuals, the audio, all those things are going to help your ELL learners to achieve in a better environment. So if you looked at the comprehension strategies that I implemented before, during, and after reading, all of those are really good for your ELL students because it allows them to open up and have a discussion with other students. So this kind of, that deliverable targets number 2 of the concentration outcome. Number 3, students will analyze theories of second language acquisition in order to identify inhibition factors to advancing language proficiency and implement informed recommendations. So this is where the mentoring program really targets. So second language acquisition is students acquiring their skills through a different lens. So socially, students interacting socially can also help them acquire that second language. And if they're being social, then they can also get recommendations from their mentors on how to use these strategies in the classroom. So that really targets and analyzes those theories. And number 4, students will determine and develop needs-based quality content, ESL curriculum, and appropriate assessment measures. So this is the KELP standards, the Connecticut English Language Proficiency Standards. This is where that ties in because you need to be able to access those standards as well as the Common Core standards to see where your students are falling in that area of need. And then based off of those standards, you can then develop assessments. based off of what the student is looking for in different language skills. The second part of the discussion and reflection section is the Master of Education outcomes. So I had pulled four from these outcomes that I really thought that I targeted throughout my master's program and throughout this whole project. So identify and critically evaluate research-based education strategies and practices. So this was, my literature review. I was able to really dive deep into other people's ideas and other case studies. And by doing this, I saw what worked and what did not work. And then, based off of these literature reviews, I then got into the bulk of my project. Um, I realized that, some comprehension strategies did work, mentoring did work. Um, the CALP standards are there for you to rely on. And things like these research based strategies are not being used in the classroom every day. So I really think that using them and learning about them through this whole experience has really gotten me to think a little more critically about my project as a whole. The second Master of Education outcome, examine and interpret a variety of educational data, resources, and research to support and inform decision making practices. So I think this also has a lot to do with just making decisions based off of being exposed to different classes. Cognitive science of teaching and learning was another course that had given me great methods and opened my eyes to bigger concepts. So in this course, we came across a book that still resonates with me. It's Making Learning Whole: How 7 Principles of Teaching Can Transform Education by David Perkins. When we look at the way students are thinking and learning, we try to focus in on different learning styles and access all learners in the classroom. For students to transfer their knowledge to everyday life, they must learn which strategies help them retain the information the most. And I think that demonstrated some of those things that support our decision making practices. And Making Learning Whole kind of brought that all back into perspective. How are we using these resources to reach all of our students and not just some of them? How are we making it meaningful to learn? Um, Another education outcome was demonstrating critical thinking skills, personal reflection. I feel like I reflected a lot these past 2 years, and it has made me grow into the professional I am today. Um, and just the creation of the digital portfolio, that was something I have never done before. So it really got me to see all of my work at once instead of breaking it apart into the different courses that we took. So going back and looking at that and reflecting on that really stuck out to me the most. And then lastly, just demonstrating my application of the content knowledge that was learned. And I think by looking at my literature reviews and the deliverables that I produced, it really just stood out to me that my panel of experts um, gave me all great feedback, and they strongly agreed with a lot of my questionnaires. And I am very happy that some of them even said, this is something you can definitely implement with time constraints, but it's something that I see as a professional and a growth mindset to use with ELL students. So I think that demonstrating that there is a problem for our English language learners and then what solutions can be used is something that I really got out of this Master of Education.